much for inviting me. So the reason why I'm so invited here is that I met Benedict-san. So maybe last March in Kyoto. At that moment, we talked a lot about the relationship between Imanishi's thinking and philosophy and architecture. Indeed, I didn't know so much about Imanishi's thinking, but I know that Imanishi Kinji was a disciple of philosopher Kitarō Nishida. So maybe Imanishi's thinking about the living things and the living things field of living is so inspired by Nishida's philosophy. So before my presentation, I want to point out several things to your presentation, but maybe later we can discuss about it. So one thing is that, in my opinion, so maybe Imanishi conceptualize the living things field of living. So it is maybe so in terms of Nishida's philosophy, it can be understood as a place. But maybe this kind of place and Imanishi notion of nature is also quite a little bit difference between them. So I want to emphasize that in Imanishi's thinking, nature and the field of living is not the same, maybe. And so second thing is that maybe this kind of field of living is a ground, so out of which the distinction between subject and versus object and maybe human and nature so emerges. But prior to this distinction, there is a field of living. Maybe this kind of field of living remains as a very deep dimension. So in this sense, maybe this kind of coupling between human and nature so might be so not so relevant for the understanding of this kind of field of living. Okay, so but maybe we can discuss about it later. Okay, so I want to start my presentation. So I'm from Kyoto University, but I'm not an architect. Just I'm a scholar of philosophy and philosophy's relationship with contemporary art and architecture. But recently, maybe so for about 5 or 6 years, I started to rethink about the importance of Nishida Kitaro's philosophy. So in relation to the contemporary ecological crisis or contemporary situation of the Anthropocene. So in this presentation, I would argue that Kitarō Nishida's discussion regarding the way in which the human mode of existence is generated out of the place can be developed in relation to the current topic regarding the place of human in the Anthropocene. In opposition to the view that Nishida's understanding of the place of human in the world can be aligned with a harmonious Eastern approach to nature, I emphasize his idea that the dimension out of which the way of human existence is generated can be touched upon as something which is created with infinite depth. So such a thought can begin with the idea that the dimension of depth at the bottom of ourself has nothing to do with the representation of the harmonious continuity between humans and nature. To speak of the dimension of depth requires us to engage with the ground out of which a notion of absolute absence of division between humans and nature can arise. Such a ground cannot be spoken in light of the notion of harmonious relationship of mutuality between humans and nature. Rather, in order to address such a ground, we need to acknowledge that it has to do with a dimension that can be attained at the limit of what Nishida identified as the world of objects, postulated by natural scientific logic of objectification. Indeed, when Nishida argues in his 1935 essay, Logic and Life, that the historical reality in which our bodily existence is embedded is not something that can be comprehended by means of the logic of objectification, but rather the material world in which human bodies are embedded. He allows us to address the question regarding the contradictory character of the Anthropocene reality in which we are living. As is discussed in the current strands of environmental humanities, regarding the question of what does the Anthropocene mean for humans, the place of humans in the Anthropocene is altered by the doings of humans, yet withdraws from the existence of humans. On the one hand, the reality of the Anthropocene as a planet Earth, altered by human activity, is discovered by way of the natural science, such as geology and earth system science, and is viewed as a scientific object. Yet, on the other hand, the reality of the Anthropocene in which humans live goes beyond the human conscious grasp. So this raises a question as to how such a place of humans must be understood. So for instance, when scholars such as Dipesh Chakrabarty identify the place of humans as contingent, not dominant, upon the planetary dimension, they allow a question that addresses the place of humans as the limit of the scientifically constructed model of the world. To be interested in the place as something that is glimpsed as a limit of the scientific logic is to such ungraspable character of place as being at the bottom of the realm of the everyday life. So basically, to speak of the human existence in the world demands an engagement with the question of how and where the mode of human existence is established. So it has to do with the ground out of which the way of human existence emerges. So in order to engage with the question of the condition for the existence of humans in the Anthropocene, we need to think about it in terms of how it can be revealed as a dimension out of which various life forms, including humans, emerge at the limit of the natural scientific logic of the control. So Nishida's understanding of the world as a dimension of depth can be fully developed with regard to the current description of the reality of the Anthropocene as a planetary dimension. So I will invoke the resonance between Dipesh Chakrabarty's idea of the revelation of the planetary otherness and Nishida's evocation of the dimension of depth. So the reality of the Anthropocene, which has been revealed by the Earth system science, can be understood as the situation in which the planet Earth becomes destabilized by the planetary impact of human activities, while it is through the scientific logic of objectification, grasping the planet Earth as an objective system, that the reality of the Anthropocene was revealed. The formation of this logic has been contemporaneous with the acquisition of the technological sensory registers through which the planet in which humans live can be seen as an object apart from the existence of humans. So indeed, the emergence of the Earth system science as a precursor of the scientific narrative of the Anthropocene coincided with the launch of Sputnik in 1957. That is, the natural scientific logic of the objectification that was further advanced with the acquisition of the point of view apart from the Earth leads to the disclosure of the Anthropocene situation in which the planet Earth has become unstable. So insofar as we see the planet Earth as constitutive of the place on which the foundation of human life is built, we can contend that the scientific discussions that reveal the planet that becomes essentially unstable and uncertain require the scholars of humanities, having engaged with the question of the human condition, to rethink the understanding of the place of humans in the world. So in order to think of the place of humans in the Anthropocene, we need to engage in the constitutive inhumanness of the situation that escapes any attempt at conscious human grasp. And then we imagining ourselves as inhabiting the place in which something inhuman is included requires us to understand that humans cannot become a dominant subject who can control the situation, but exist in the contingent and vulnerable way. Toward envisioning the condition of the human existence, we are required to ask a question of how one defines the humans who assumes its way of living on the basis of its very vulnerability to the planet that goes beyond the human conscious control. So it demands us to be receptive to the vulnerability of humans in the face of the radical uncertainty and to acknowledge the limit of the human control. Thinking of the condition of human existence on Earth as the limit of the control demands us to abandon the idea that humans are dominant on the Earth and to start from an encounter with the aspect of our own lives that emerge out of the place of entanglement with other forms of life. As Chakrabarti argues, to assume that human existence on the basis of its encounter with the planetary dimension is to think of the place of humans in terms of its contradictory character. For Chakrabarti, the place of humans can be thought as something that is simultaneously inhabited by humans and goes far beyond what humans can experience. So, in order to approach such a contradictory place, we need to address something like an excess that goes beyond the human capacity to control. By excess might be meant what Nishida identifies as the locus of creation. So what goes beyond human control is creative because it is intrinsic to the dimension of depth, out of which the creative element, including human, emerges. So regarding such a paradoxical dimension, Nishida formulates that the locus we can think of as transcending our bodily self in the historical world is the locus where we are born. For Nishida, the place wherein our self is impressed is not the same as the solid ground that is mutually related with the way of human life. Rather, it is at the bottom of ourself, which goes beyond our capacity to grasp. Yet, simultaneously, it is the locus out of which our bodily existence is generated. Although Nishida's thought regarding the notion of place is formulated in a highly metaphysical way, it is directed towards the question of how our everyday lives are established. To think of the ground out of which our way of everyday lives is established is to engage in something that is lived or embodied by humans, yet is at the limit of the natural scientific logic. Nishida approaches it in terms of his notion of the active self. So, when Nishida argues that the active self is unable to enter into the world of objects postulated by the logic of objectification, and that the world of historical reality must be inclusive of the self at work, he allows the limit of the scientific logic, not in the sense that it is restricted, but it is limited within the confine that is grasped in the light of the logic of objectification. For Nishida, the human as a bodily existence eludes such a confine because it is established within what he identifies as the world of historical reality, whereas Nishida admits that the scientific logic of objectification regulates our way of life and contributes to the development of the modern world. He assumes the ground of human bodily existence on the basis of its being assimilable to the construct of the modern everyday life. For Nishida, to be interested in something that is assimilable to and at the bottom of the everyday life is to think such an excess as a movement of generation or flow that arises out of a certain dimension of depth, and Nishida calls it place. By place, Nishida did not mean something like a solid ground upon which the human construct such as house and building are consolidated. So for Nishida, to speak of the notion of place where we are impressed is to engage with something indeterminate that presides over the establishment of the everyday life shaped by the modern technology. When Nishida writes that life is established in virtue of place or basho determining itself, he allows us to ask the question of place in terms of how the human as bodily existence is generated. And so place not in the sense that the activity of human life is grounded by it, but because it is generated out of its indeterminacy. He describes the place in light of his notion, a determination without a determiner, 限定なき限定. The mode of human existence, when it is addressed in terms of its emplacement within the place, is indistinguishable from the indeterminacy of the place from which it is generated. Indeed, Nishida's concern with the question of place can be seen as an engagement with the question of where and how we are embraced in the world, to the extent that we can enjoy our ordinary life. We feel that our bodily existence is subtended by the firm basis of the everyday world. Yet, once our ordinary life is threatened in such a way as to be located from such a firm ground, so, for instance, in the midst of such as war and natural disaster, we are confronted with the dimension of the indeterminacy that is at the bottom of our existence. So, in this regard, one can reformulate Nishida's thought as that which is directed towards the view of what defines the human mode of existence in terms of the doubling of two different dimensions of the world. So for Nishida, to speak of the human existence as something embraced within place is to think of how humans simultaneously inhabit the dimension of everyday life and the deeper dimension of the indeterminacy. On the one hand, following Nishida, so we can speak of the dimension of objective world of objects, the material world as the most objective or real, within which our life, our body is embraced. Such a dimension, when addressed in terms of its materiality, is external to the existence of humans. When Nishida writes that our acting is established in this world of things, and that it is different from the world of mechanistic matter, he allows us to think of the world of things as that which establishes the environmental condition upon which our activity of living is embraced and subtended. Nevertheless, for Nishida, by the world of things is meant the locus out of which the human act of making emerges. So more precisely, to speak of the world, a world of things that defines our bodily existence is to think of such a single nature of the world in terms of the human act of making, a human act to make things as tools. That is, when attending to the world of things as that which defines the human existence, one attends to the objective dimension in which the bodily existence of human is subtended by the things that are produced by the human activity of making. Yet, on the other hand, following the movement of thought implied by Nishida's writing, we can speak of the dimension of the depth of the world, that dimension that presides over establishment of the everyday world. For Nishida, so in order to pay attention to the dimension of depth of the world, we are required to be aware of the impermanence of our life. But what confronts us humans, aware of our lives and deaths, is not the mere world of things as objects. Rather, it has to be the world of historical thing events, the world of historical world. Our self is born out of the depths of the world of historical reality. So such a dimension depth in Nishida's case is glimpsed as the edge of the everyday world of things, as the accomplishment of human activity of making. Yet, as far as it is grasped as a dimension out of which humans are born, it is not necessarily indifferent to the existence of human. For Nishida, to be interested in the dimension of depth of the world is to think such dimension that would be touched at the bottom of ourself. Being touched by the dimension of depth, the human as a bodily existence becomes endowed with a dynamic and creative activity through which the world of things in which humans are impressed is constructed. And it is through this formative act that human beings are to possess tools in such a way as to possess their bodily existence as tools. Meanwhile, the doubling of the dimension of the world doubles the human as a bodily existence. On the one hand, there is a human as active self that does not only perceive and change the external world, but also establishes the world of things within which we live our daily lives. On the other hand, there is another kind of humanness that is born out of the dimension of depth of the world and is subsequently embodied as a true being that is interrelated with other beings. One can grasp it as a pre-active human in that it is about to be born out of the dimension of depth, but remains an inactive thing-like element. Following Nishida, one can argue that the human as a bodily existence plays an intermediary role through which two dimensions, the dimension of the objective things of the world and the dimension of the depths of the world, are merged, yet not resolved into a harmonious relationship of mutuality. If the human, as the bodily existence, takes its form of active self out of the dimension of depth of the world, it is not separable from the depths of the world, but rather it is of the depths of the world as the site of the creative force. The dimension of depth can be understood as a foundational site out of which the human construct of everyday living can arise. Indeed, when Nishida approaches the creative force in terms of the formative act whereby the world determines itself, he allows us the question of how the world of things becomes an expression of our lives through the intermediary act of our body. As Nishida argues, it is at the moment when our self becomes a creative element that things become expressive of life. And he adds that things that become expressive of lives can be grasped as tools that are constituent part of the instrumental world. Yet, when Nishida further writes that our bodily self becomes active as a creative element and the flow of historical life permits our body, he allows us to think that the circumstances in which our bodily existence becomes a creative element arising from the dimension of depth at the bottom of the everyday world. A reading of Nishida in terms of the doubleness of the world allows us to think about the question of what is human as a bodily existence in terms of how and where it is generated and then impressed. Firstly, when attending to the dimension of the objective world of things, which are products of the human activity of making, yet independent from it, one can attend to the bodily existence of human that is impressed in the world of things and defined by it. And secondly, when attending to the dimensions of depth of the world, which Nishida thinks of as transcending our bodily existence, it becomes possible to comprehend the human bodily existence as the one who is born out of the dimension of depth that is at the bottom of us. Thirdly, when approaching the moment when those dimensions are merged and become inseparable by means of the transformative act whereby the world determines itself, one attends to the moment when the human as a bodily existence becomes truly created by way of being entangled with the movement of the self-determination of the world through which the world of things becomes expressive of our life.
So thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Shinohara.